Andy, thanks for joining us on ITV News.
Dan, you're welcome.
It's been 24 hours since the talks broke down, since the government imposed Tier 3 without your approval. Do you have any regrets?
No, I don't. See, when I left Westminster with my good friend Steve Rotherham, we both said, well, what are we about? People, not politics. That's what we're in this for. And I think this is sometimes why Westminster doesn't understand us. They put politics before people down there, so we're always at cross purposes. But this was all about standing up for people whose lives are about to change through no fault of their own. And this is the point, Dan. I've been in politics a long time, and I've probably seen more than anybody how the North gets pushed around by Westminster. Now, I've seen it, I've lived through it. But on this occasion, it was a step too far, because if you're going to lock down people's lives, it can't be on someone else's terms down there. It has to be right for people here on our terms if we're to agree to that happening. And that's what went wrong here. A decision was imposed from miles away without truly understanding the impact that it would have on people's lives. And at some point, you have to just stick up for what you feel is right for people. And at all moments through this, I knew what I was doing, why I was doing it. I was talking to Steve on a regular basis. I wouldn't have changed. I mean, there's small things maybe, but no. The stand we took was the right one.
Given the government is now going to give Greater Manchester £60 million anyway, it says it's going to give them to individual councils. The fact is, they're going to do this anyway, Andy. So do you not look back and think, I could have just taken that 60 million and carried on trying to get more, because they're going to get it anyway?
Well, this is what's strange today. The government is talking about it as though it's a formula, as though there was never a negotiation. But if that's the case, what were we doing then over the last few days? Why did they offer us 50 million to begin with? If
so
it was
you're saying in the 10 days you were negotiating, the government never talked about a formula for business support?
No, they said it needed to be a negotiation between us and them, and we went into it in good faith. And Greater Manchester stuck together, and I'm very proud actually of all of our leaders who came together and backed me through this. But we all felt we were in a negotiation. As kind of late as Monday, the idea of a hardship fund was put on the table, but then taken off again by ministers. So at no point did I not feel that I was in a real negotiation. But now to read today, it was always a formula, and there was no way that Greater Manchester was ever going to get more than Lancashire or Liverpool. I mean, I think, well, what was that all about then?
Do you think they're lying?
I don't know what was going on. As I say, politics before people is the way it's done down there, and I think there was a lot of politics in this. Let's take it back, Dan, if I may, just to the sort of the whole episode, because I think it began 2 weeks ago today with a story in the Times newspaper, briefed by 10 Downing Street, saying that pubs across the north of England were going to close. So that was the first we heard of what was coming. And obviously we spoke as leaders. What's this? You're just going to lock down people's jobs without even talking to us about it. But that's where it began. And I think what they then had was a political strategy that then worked through, where they would go to Liverpool first and then work through all of the different places. And of course they tried to play my great friend Steve off against me as part of this strategy. But nothing will ever separate us. They shouldn't have known that for a start.
The fact is, to interrupt you, Andy, the fact is Steve Rotherham reluctantly, but still, accepted Tier 3 restrictions and the money he was given. Lancashire have accepted Tier 3 restrictions and the money they were given. It looks now as if South Yorkshire are doing the same. You are standing alone here. You are the only one who's refused it.
No,
so
it's
you're not united across the north, are you?
No, it's not right. It's not right, Dan. So, if you speak to Steve, he was in a different position as we were back in July with the statistics that he had. So, he had accepted they needed to move into Tier 3, but the way in which they negotiated with him, if you speak to him, I mean, he's never been happy since about the way he feels things were done. But Steve negotiated a parity clause, so whatever anywhere else after him got, they would get. So he and I were working together on that. Obviously we were. They couldn't divide us. But then you speak to Lancashire councillors. Look at the front page on the Lancashire Evening Telegraph. Blackmailed and bullied, I think, the headline there. So, this wasn't a negotiation. This was basically bulldozed through. And we took a stand. So, no regrets for taking that stand. Because the point is, they were imposing an arbitrary formula one by one on places. We've decided, you're getting that, bump, there you go Liverpool, there you go Lancashire, and then they came to us. And I said, we're not doing it that way. We're going to talk about what the need will be of people whose jobs are locked down by what you are about to do. We're going to talk about the businesses that already are on the edge, because we've had 3 months of restrictions here already. That was what we needed to talk about. And so I came at this from a point of need. What would Greater Manchester need? What would the people here need to get through a winter in Tier 3 restrictions? But it doesn't seem that they were talking about need. They just wanted to impose what they'd already decided was going to be the maximum we would get. And I come back to this point, Dan, if you're going to lock down people's lives, you do it on our terms, not on terms imposed from London.
On that, let's get into the details of the numbers here. The government say in the end they offered £60 million. You rejected that number. What was your red line? What were you asking for when you spoke to the Prime Minister on the phone? What was the difference in sums?
Well, I started with people, as I said, so not a number. I started with what I thought was right and proper if you're closing down people's businesses.
And how much was that?
So what I started with was I wanted to get enough so we can commit to an 80% furlough for those people working in pubs, in bookies and other places who wouldn't have a job to go to, and 80% support for people who are self-employed, low-paid self-employed, like taxi drivers, people working in security. That is where it began. And I said to my team, I want to be able to do that because that is right and proper if people's jobs are being locked down. So the figure that my team carefully worked out, and it involves people who used to work in the Treasury, was that would cost £15 million a year. So we went to the government to say to the end of the financial year...
Do you mean £15 a month?
Sorry, £15 million a month. My apologies. Thank you, Dan. Been a bit tiring few days. £15 million a month. So to the end of the financial year, £90 million if you take the 6 months. Of course, we would always be prepared to move in negotiations. And of course, we'll always say, well, is there something we could find to put into this? So that was where I was coming from. That was where I started. And yesterday, as late as yesterday morning, my team were talking to civil servants in London about a £75 million fund that we might contribute to and the government would put in the vast majority of. And that would have taken us from the 5 months from November to the end of the financial year. And so that felt about right to me. And I thought, well, we probably could make a contribution. Then we heard that ministers were not prepared to do that. First it was 50 million and 55. But as we know now, Dan, that was lower than the formula that they're now talking about today. So I was quite clear, I needed that £75 million fund. And yes, I could probably have found something from within my own budgets, but that meant 65 really had to come at least from the government. So that was my line, and I couldn't go below it. Otherwise, I couldn't meet the commitment to those people working in pubs, working in bookies, people driving taxis. That was always what was driving me, and they don't understand that down there. They don't understand what their lives are like, and they don't really care enough about how their lives are going to change in lockdown.
Did you tell that to the Prime Minister? You spoke to the Prime Minister on the phone. Did you say to him, this is how much I'm asking for, and this is why?
Yes.
And what did he say?
We had on a personal level, I said to him, there's nothing personal here, there's nothing political here. I said, when you were Mayor of London, Prime Minister, you spoke up for London. I remember, because I was a minister at the time, and he did it very effectively. But I am just doing the same, so don't hold it against me. And I'm saying that we need this amount of money to do this, to do what you want. But if you can commit to this, I can get this through. I can bring the leaders
what did he say to
with
that?
me. 60 is the maximum. I hear what you say, yes, and we're all very polite.
And did he say why?
No.
Did he mention a formula?
No, it was 60 was the maximum they could do.
And he didn't give a reason for why they couldn't go to that extra 5
No, I
million.
worked it out, I think, eventually, that Lancashire had 30 and that they weren't prepared to negotiate with me. I think I'd worked that out. But that's where we kind of got to between those two positions. And I would argue that mine was based on people and need, and they were coming at it, I think, from a different angle.
Government sources say that you said to the Prime Minister, "It's important to me that I get more." Did you say that? And what did you mean by that?
Well, I think I would dispute that I used those exact words. What I said to him is, this is the second city of the country. We have more businesses here. And this is the crucial bit, Dan. And, Steve and I have been talking about this today. We've been under 3 months of restrictions, and they come at a cost. They come at a cost to people's businesses, because the very kind of idea of restrictions is to stop people mixing, stop people going out. So of course it reduces footfall. So the government must accept that restrictions have a cost to business, but we've had nothing in respect of those restrictions that have been in here since late July. So that was our argument, that both we have more businesses than Lancashire and Merseyside, and we've been in restrictions for 3 months longer. And for those reasons, we need more. We can't accept the same, because I'd be selling people here short. So, obviously, they will spin it the way they want to, but that is what I said to him.
And categorically, you're saying you didn't say it's important to me that I get more, because what
I said we can't have the same as Lancashire and Liverpool, because
we're not in this about you.
No,
that's the argument here, that you have made this about you. It's about your own personal pride. It's your own reputation.
They tried to spin that. That's the interpretation they tried to put on it. I said I can't accept the same when we have been in restrictions for longer, when we have got more businesses here. The need is greater. How can I sell people here short in that way? But actually, more than that, I know what I need to protect people through the restrictions that you want to impose. So no, it wasn't just about me, or have I got a bigger check than somebody else. Absolutely not. I completely reject that. I based it all on what we'd already been through, and how we've suffered already, if you like, because of the restrictions that I agreed to with the other leaders back in the summer.
The government says this £60 million they offered to you in the end is still on the table. It has Greater Manchester's name written on it, as Robert Jenrick said today. They will now speak to individual councils to see how to distribute that money. What is your message to the boroughs of Greater Manchester, the council leaders who you've been working with? Is it to accept that money, or is it to reject it, or try and negotiate more? What will you be telling them?
Well, we've stuck together all the way through this, and we'll continue to stick together. And
what does that mean in the context of the question I asked you?
I'll answer you. We'll do what's right for the people here. We've done what's right for their health, and we'll do what's right for their lives and their livelihoods. So what I first need to say to you is, I said to the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, yesterday on the phone at 2:00 when he said he was going to impose. I said, well, I take it you're imposing the 60 million as well then, because you put that on the table. You can't take that off the table. And as we now know, Dan, that's the formula. So it would have automatically come with it anyway. So now, why was it ever off the table? Why did they brief that we only had £22 million? And why all of a sudden is it not coming to me, the Great Manchester Combined Authority? If it's a deal that they've done with the Liverpool city region, why is it now being bypassed away and sent to the councils? So as far as I'm concerned, that should have been the position, but he said no, there was no guarantee on the 60 million. So I said, you've been playing poker here. You've been playing poker with me, with people's lives. You've been saying that that money was contingent upon me agreeing it, and going on bended knee to say, thank you. But that's what Westminster and Whitehall's done to the north since time began. And basically, I wasn't doing it because I had not agreed that was the right amount of money. But I said, I hope you're imposing that £60 million. He said no, it didn't come with it.
And that's an important clarification here. So you're saying that when you spoke to Robert Jenrick on the phone at 2:00 and you asked him directly, are we still getting that £60 million, which they say now Greater Manchester is going to get, you're saying that Robert Jenrick said no?
Yes.
Categorically?
Yes.
So when you now hear Robert Jenrick saying it was always a sign for Greater Manchester, it always had Greater Manchester's name on it, you're saying he's lying?
Well, he's saying now that he would say probably that it was withdrawn from me. That's probably what he would say, that it was withdrawn from the conversation and the negotiation with me. And then...
But you asked the question about Greater Manchester. Is
I did,
Greater
yeah,
Manchester
I
gonna get
did.
that money?
I said, I take it it's going to be imposed. So I have a witness for that conversation. And we were told no, or there was no guarantee of that. Can't remember the exact words, but it was something of that kind. And then it was briefed to Greater Manchester MPs that we were only going to get 22 million. They decided to remove it from us completely. And then it was back on the table later in the evening. So I don't know. The story seemed to change down there as the day wore on. But no, it was removed. But now it's a formula. I don't even see why it's going to hand it over is what I would say. If it's a formula, hand it over
to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, to you.
So we're in agreement with our 10 councils, because I would do what we will discuss now in the next day or so what we think is the right thing to be done. But I'd just say let's stop the kind of like games here. I mean, this is people, and all of us in the end will look like there's games going on when people's jobs are about to be locked down. Just stop all of that. Put the money on the table that you're prepared to give us, and then we will speak to people here, the business community, others in Greater Manchester, to see what we can do to get to a position where we can offer that furlough to those staff who are the lowest paid, and hopefully 80% for people who are self-employed too. So let's just get on with that job now. I'm actually fed up with the time we've wasted with Westminster, to be honest. When we now need to sort of get on and protect people from what's coming.
On that phone call with Robert Jenrick, there was a moment yesterday during the press conference that you held where you were shown by two people, one of them Sir Richard Lees, a tweet, I think, on a phone showing what had just been announced, what had just been told to Greater Manchester MPs, that Greater Manchester would be placed in Tier 3 and £22 million was the figure. It seemed to those watching that was the first time you were hearing it. Was that the first time you were told that? Because it seems to me now that you had a phone call with Robert Jenrick at 2 o'clock and he's saying that he told you at 2 o'clock that was going to be the case.
So no, what happened, to go back to what I said a moment ago, I was in that conversation saying that I take it the 60 million comes with this imposition. That was what I said to him. And he said, no, there's no guarantee of that, or words to that effect. So I was starting to think, well, what does come with it then? The 50 that you offered me earlier in the day, the 55, the what? So I didn't know what they were going to do. And then it was briefed to our MPs that it was 22 million, finished. And that's what came over on the phone when the message was put in front of me. And that's what all of the Greater Manchester MPs in that meeting heard. So that was what was being put to me for the first time.
So you knew it was Tier 3 at that stage?
Yep.
But you didn't know the sum of money.
No.
That was what the surprise from your
Correct.
angle was.
Correct.
It wasn't you knew about Tier 3
Yes.
at that point. Okay, thanks for clearing that up. One argument on numbers again, because the ministers are saying, yes, it's 2/3 wages, not 80% this time round on a furlough scheme. What they say is that for lower paid workers, if you throw in universal credit and other access to benefits, it actually looks more like 90%. Do you accept that for some workers, they were always going to get above the 80% you were asking for?
There's two problems with that. For some, is the first, you said it, Dan. So it's not for all. So how can we be for some and not for all at a time like this? You've got to be for everybody at a time like this, haven't you, in the middle of a pandemic? And actually, it's some of the very lowest paid workers who would lose out here. Some people who are younger, people who have no kids, some of the people who are really in a difficult position. So it's not for everybody. And actually, this was a really instructive moment in the negotiations. So this was last week, last Thursday. The Prime Minister had said in the House that everyone would be guaranteed the top-up and it would get to over 90% for everybody. And we didn't think that was true. So in the middle of a discussion with 10 Downing Street, I said, well, is the Treasury on the call? Because we want clarification on something. We want clarification that it's true that every single worker in a place that's going to be shut will get over 90%. Is that true? Silence. I said, can we have an answer? And this voice, it's such a body from the Treasury. Can we get back to you on that, Mayor? I said, no, you can't actually, because this is about people's lives, and the fact that you don't know the answer to that question, or you're not prepared to tell me the answer to that question, tells me that you've not adequately thought through the impact of the policies you're about to inflict on 2.8 million people in Greater Manchester. So no, you can't get back to me another time. I want the answer now. And eventually, I'd say it's about 10 or 15 minutes later, another civil servant read out basically the position that you just described, that some people get it, but not everybody. But then the second problem with it, Dan, is, as you know, universal credit does not get paid straight away. Now, that might not mean much to ministers or civil servants down there. 5 weeks, well, they can find ways round that. But here, if you are talking about people who work in one of the betting shops around the corner or in one of the local pubs, can you now wait 5 weeks before you get any of that top up on 2/3 of your wages? No. And that's why I said yesterday, just for us to nod that through was to kind of inflict certain hardship, I would say certain homelessness on some people, a mental health crisis bigger than the one we've already got, and of course business failure across Greater Manchester. So this was the way this discussion went. And can you see now why we didn't have confidence in what we were being told? We did not think the government had done due diligence, to use that phrase, on the impact their policies would have on the people, the poorest people who will be most affected by them. And in those circumstances, why I come back to what I said at the beginning, no regrets, because when you see what's going on in those discussions and you understand what's happening, a Westminster government imposing its will on the north of England, locking down people's jobs, locking down people's lives, but not with any regard for what effect that will have on their lives. You've got to say no to that, and you've got to stand up to that, and that's what I did.
Have you at any point during negotiations or in the last 3 months since Tier 2 restrictions have been imposed, they weren't Tier 2 at the time, but we now know they are, have you invited the Prime Minister up to Greater Manchester to see what's going on?
We had a really good conversation. It would have been about a month ago, and I think we had, I can't remember the exact exchange, but I was saying, look, I'm here to help. If you're going to be in Manchester, let's have a chat. I can't remember, I don't think it was a formal invite, but of course I would welcome him to come up here now to kind of, if you like, clear the air, talk it through, reset things on a better footing. I'm not after anything here, Dan, that is a lingering political argument. I did what I did for the right reason, and it gets misunderstood down there, as I said to you.
But you'd like him to come here and talk to you face to face?
Absolutely, anytime. And Manchester, Greater Manchester, has always had a constructive, pragmatic relationship with whatever government of the day, and that goes for this one. And I've tried to work with them a lot, actually, during this pandemic. But things got more and more difficult, and there comes a point where, you just can't accept what you're being told. And the point is, they were meant to be in favour of devolution, and sometimes devolution, if devolution's to be real, it is about saying, somebody in my position, just saying, no, the UK government cannot just impose its will on England anymore, and particularly the north of England, and just expect us all to agree to that. And I would probably say to him if he came, you, above all people, Boris, should know that, because you've been a mayor and you had those arguments on behalf of Londoners with people in Whitehall departments. So I imagine he does understand that, and I don't know why we ended up in this position, why a government committed to levelling up got involved in my view, in a serious act of levelling down across the north, because that's what it's doing at the moment. It's just imposing these deals one after another across the north, levelling down Lancashire, levelling down Liverpool, levelling down Sheffield, levelling down Greater Manchester.
And on devolution, final couple of questions. On devolution, do you think English devolution in this pandemic has ultimately failed? Because you tried to stand up, and you've given the reasons why you have for your region. It didn't work. The government have done what they want to do anyway. So going forward, does the devolution powers that you have to change? Would you like more powers, tax-raising powers, more financial powers, to mean that this doesn't happen again?
I wouldn't say it's failed. It's been difficult because we've faced a very kind of centralising sort of mentality within the current government, even though they said they were in favour of devolution. But mayors have found their voice through this. Sadiq has been challenging the government. So has Steve in Liverpool, Andy Street in Birmingham. We've all challenged the government. And I think the public are beginning to say, you know what, we weren't sure about these mayors. Was it another layer? Was there any point of them? And I just get the feeling now maybe people say, actually, there's something in this, because they're standing up now for people in a way that the Westminster system, where you've got a tiny constituency, doesn't allow you to do. And these people are beginning to use their voice. But
you're standing up and you're using your voice, but ultimately you are powerless. You lost this discussion.
Well, of course, when the government holds all the money and all the power, it makes you go on bended knee.
And that's what I'm
making. And it makes you sort of say, and actually it makes you sometimes not stand up to them because you fear what they will do. And I would say to everybody in your line of business, just watch now what happens to Greater Manchester with funding over the next 6 months, because I've seen governments, lose one, or they win, as you say, but maybe they lose in a different way, and then they take it out, later down.
Later down the line, will be punished.
I think people need to. I don't know. I mean, I found it a punishing negotiation. I'll be honest with you. Fairly depressing on many levels. When I felt I was arguing, stories about me in the newspapers appearing pretty much every day through this negotiation, pretty much every day. So I'm fighting, in my view, for self-employed people and people who are low paid, and I'm being undermined because I'm fighting for people who earn less than who will get less than the minimum wage by being undermined in certain newspapers. I mean, what's that all about? Well, that is what happens, of course. Whitehall and Westminster uses its power in those kind of ways and makes people go quiet, makes people sort of say, "Oh, I won't stand up to them. I'll just sort of accept what they're saying." And that's been inflicted on the north of England for years and years and years, under the Labour government that I was in as well, by the way. I'm not making any differentiation with that. It's the way they've always worked. But do you know what, Dan? There does come a point. There was a point on Hillsborough, there was a point on this. Well, maybe not, those are different issues, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you just say, you cannot lock down lives and just dictate to those people that's what you're going to get. That's it.
My final question. You resisted very publicly these restrictions, and for all the reasons you've stated, but do you not worry that given they're starting in a couple of days' time, that people will take what you've said and take the defence you have made as an excuse not to follow the rules? Do you worry that people will not follow these rules, this virus will continue to spread in your name, in the message that you've put across, and the resistance that you've given?
Well, first thing I've got to say to that is I've got to say a huge thank you to the public of Greater Manchester for the backing that they've given me, because sometimes it is quite a lonely place when you're going out there, but the backing has been just fantastic. And what I would say to people is, hopefully that I've got their ear for this moment. Follow the rules, keep the distancing, wash your hands, wear your face coverings everywhere, shops, public transport, because that's the way Manchester, shows that we know what's right, and we know we're going to have to look after each other now because the government pulled away.
Do you not worry a little bit? Do you not worry, have that moment where you think, I know I'm doing this for the right reasons, but I worry that people won't follow the rules because of the reasons I've made.
Well, I don't know who knows, how can you predict things? Yeah. But I'll be asking people, to in respect of what we've all done together, because it wasn't just me, everyone came together and stood together, and it was amazing actually the levels of support. And I would just say to everybody, and we've seen the spirit of Greater Manchester, haven't we, in so many ways over the years, the way in which people do pull together, do rally round. We're going to need to do that now, because we are going to have a really tough winter ahead of us because of what's happened. We aren't being offered, in my view, what we need to get through a winter in Tier 3. So we're going to have to look after each other, and that means respecting the public health advice at all times to prevent the spread and protect people within our communities, but also looking out for each other from a financial point of view as well, those people who are going to be really struggling. So, we are now, I guess, more, the onus is on us even more now in this moment to follow the rules, to stand by each other and observe the letter of the law and what we're being asked to do. And I think that's the best way that Greater Manchester can respond to this, by really kind of pulling together, both in terms of observing the right thing to do by each other, but also in looking after each other.
Andy Burnham, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.